The rain didn't just fall, it hammered against the glass. It was a cold, angry November rain in Seattle, the kind that soaks through your coat in seconds and settles in your bones. Arthur pulled his collar up. It didn't help. His coat was torn at the shoulder, his beard was gray and matted, his boots were held together with black electrical tape. He looked at the neon sign buzzing above him. Sal's Diner, open 24 hours, the S was flickering. On, off, on, off. Arthur stared at that light for a long time. He remembered when he bought that sign. He remembered the ladder, the smell of the new glass, the way his wife, Martha, had held the bottom of the ladder and told him not to fall. That was 40 years ago. Martha was gone now and looking at Arthur, standing in the rain with shaking hands. You would never guess that he was the one who signed the checks for this place, or the checks for the other 400 locations across the country. He wasn't Arthur Sterling, the billionaire CEO, tonight. He was just an old man who missed his wife, and he was hungry. He pushed the door open, the bell chimed. It was a cheerful sound, a sound that used to make him smile, but tonight it just sounded loud. The diner was warm, it smelled of bacon grease and old coffee. He took 2 steps inside, he dripped water onto the black and white checkered floor. The chatter in the diner stopped. A fork hit a plate. Silence. Arthur didn't look up. He kept his eyes on his boots. He just wanted a booth in the back, a cup of coffee, and maybe a slice of the cherry pie Martha used to bake. He took another step. Excuse me. The voice cut through the silence like a whip. Arthur stopped. He looked up. Standing behind the counter was a man in a pristine white shirt. His name tag was gold. It read, Brad, General Manager. Brad wasn't smiling. His arms were crossed over his chest. His biceps bulged against the fabric. He looked like he spent more time at the gym than he did managing the kitchen. Brad walked around the counter. He didn't walk. He strutted. He stopped 3 feet from Arthur. He wrinkled his nose. You're lost. Brad said it wasn't a question. Arthur coughed. His throat was dry. No, Arthur said. His voice was raspy, just hungry. Brad laughed. It was a cruel sound, short and sharp. The soup kitchen is 6 blocks that way. Brad said, pointing at the door. We don't serve your kind here. Arthur looked at him. My kind? Arthur asked. Vagrants. Brad spat the word out. Drug addicts. Bums who smell like wet dog and scare the paying customers. He took a step closer. He invaded Arthur's space. Look at the floor. Brad said, you're dripping mud everywhere. I just had that mopped. Arthur looked down. There were a few drops of water, maybe a speck of mud. I'll clean it up. Arthur said softly, I just want a coffee. I can pay. He reached into his pocket. His hand shook. He pulled out a crumpled $10 bill. It was damp from the rain. Brad slapped his hand. The $10 bill fluttered to the wet floor. I don't want your dirty money. Brad hissed. I want you out, now, before I call the cops and have you thrown in the tank for trespassing. Arthur stood there. He looked at the money on the floor. He looked at the sign on the wall that said, Family Dining. He felt a heavy weight in his chest. He had built this company on one rule, feed everyone, treat everyone like family. And now, standing in the very first location he ever built, he was being treated like trash. He looked at Brad. He saw the arrogance in the man's eyes, the complete lack of empathy. Arthur took a deep breath. He was about to speak. He was about to tell Brad exactly who he was, but he didn't get the chance because someone else stepped in. Wait, it was a soft voice, but it was firm. A waitress appeared from the kitchen. She was young, maybe 25. Her apron was stained with ketchup. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her name tag said, Sarah. She walked right past Brad. She knelt down on the floor. She picked up the wet $10 bill. She wiped it off on her apron. She stood up and handed it back to Arthur. Ignore him. Sarah said gently. She smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. There's a booth in the back. Number 4, it's near the heater. You look cold. Brad spun around. His face turned purple. Sarah, Brad growled. What do you think you're doing? Sarah didn't flinch, but Arthur saw her hands shaking. I'm seating a customer. Brad, she said, he's not a customer. Brad yelled, he's a health hazard. Look at him. He's a human being. Sarah said quietly, and he has money. And tables 1 through 6 are my section, so I'm seating him. She turned her back on her boss. Come on, sweetie, she said to Arthur. Let's get you some coffee. She touched Arthur's arm. Her hand was warm. Arthur looked at her. He saw the fear in her eyes. She was terrified of Brad, but she was helping him anyway. And in that moment, Arthur knew he wasn't leaving, not yet. He needed to see how this played out. Because he had a feeling that tonight wasn't just about a cup of coffee anymore. It was about the soul of his company, and he was going to fight for it. Arthur slid into the red vinyl booth. The leather was cracked. He ran his thumb over the split. He remembered when he upholstered these seats. 1984. He had stapled the vinyl himself because they couldn't afford a contractor. Sarah placed a mug on the table. Steam rose from it. She didn't just pour the coffee. She brought a small basket of crackers and a glass of water with no ice. Because he looked cold. "Thank you," Arthur said. Sarah lingered for a second. She glanced toward the front of the restaurant where Brad was angrily texting on his phone. "I'm sorry about him," she whispered. "He's having a bad night or a bad life, I'm not sure which." Arthur wrapped his cold hands around the mug. "Does he treat everyone like that?" Arthur asked. Sarah sighed. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Only the people he thinks don't matter," she said. She looked down at her notepad. "He fired the dishwasher last week because he dropped a plate. The kid was 16. It was his first job. Brad screamed at him until he cried." Arthur tightened his grip on the mug. "Why do you stay?" he asked. Sarah looked out the window at the rain. "I have a little boy," she said. "Leo. He has asthma. The medical bills are—" She trailed off. She shook her head. "I need the tips. And this place is the only diner in town that offers overtime." She forced another smile. "But enough about me. What can I get you?" "The meatloaf is fresh tonight." Arthur looked at her. She was exhausted, she was scared, and she was working herself to the bone for a man who despised her. "I'll have the cherry pie," Arthur said. Sarah's face fell slightly. "Oh, I'm sorry, we don't have the cherry pie anymore." Arthur froze. "What?" "Brad took it off the menu 3 months ago," she explained. "He said fresh cherries were too expensive. We use frozen apple turnovers now." Arthur felt a sharp pain in his chest. The cherry pie was Martha's recipe. It was the signature dish. It was on the logo. "Why?" Arthur asked. His voice was barely a whisper. "Cost-cutting," Sarah said. "Brad gets a bonus if he keeps food costs under 20%. She looked over her shoulder. Brad was watching them. His eyes were narrowed. "I better go," she whispered. "I'll get you that turnover." She hurried away. Arthur sat there. He looked around the diner. Now that he was looking, really looking, he saw the neglect. The light fixtures were dusty. The floor tiles were chipped. The menu was sticky. This wasn't the place he built. This was a hollow shell, a machine designed to squeeze pennies out of people. He felt sick. He had been so busy in his glass office in Chicago looking at spreadsheets that he had forgotten to look at the diners. He had let men like Brad take over. He took a sip of the coffee. It was burnt. He set the mug down hard. He watched Sarah moving between the tables. She was fast, efficient. She stopped at a table with a family. A little girl had spilled her milk. Brad would have yelled. Sarah just laughed, grabbed a towel, and made a joke that made the little girl smile. She was the only bright spot in this gray, dying place, and Arthur knew with a sinking feeling that she was about to pay the price for her kindness, because Brad was walking toward the kitchen, and he had the look of a man who was ready to break something. Arthur watched him go. He reached into his pocket and felt the phone he had turned off 3 days ago. He turned it on. The screen lit up. 50 missed calls, 20 urgent emails. He ignored them all. He opened his contacts. He scrolled down to District Manager, Seattle. He didn't call yet. He placed the phone face down on the table. He waited. 5 minutes later, Sarah came out of the kitchen. She was holding a plate with a sad-looking, flat pastry on it. She walked toward Arthur, but Brad stepped into her path. He didn't move aside. He stood right in the center of the aisle. "Move, Brad," Sarah said, "please." Brad looked at the plate. "Is that for the bum?" he asked loudly. The whole diner could hear. "Yes." Sarah said. "Did he pay for it?" Brad asked. "He has money." Sarah said. "I didn't ask if he has money." Brad shouted. "I asked if he paid for it yet." "No." Sarah said. "He pays when he's done. That's how restaurants work, not for him." Brad said. He reached out. He grabbed the plate from Sarah's hand. "Brad, don't." Sarah warned. Brad looked at Arthur. He made eye contact. Then, with a sneer, he tilted the plate. The pastry slid off. It hit the floor with a wet slap. "Oops." Brad said. He smiled. Looks like we're out of food. He looked at Sarah. And you're out of a job. Sarah stood frozen, her mouth opened. What? You heard me. Brad said. You're fired. Get your stuff. Get out. Sarah's lip trembled. Brad, please, I have rent due on Tuesday. You can't do this. I just did. Brad said. Insubordination. Feeding vagrants against company policy. He pointed a thick finger at her face. You are a liability. Sarah, you're soft. And business doesn't have room for soft people. Tears spilled over Sarah's cheeks. She looked at Arthur. She looked at the food on the floor. She untied her apron. Her hands were shaking so hard she couldn't get the knot loose. She finally pulled it over her head and threw it on the counter. She didn't say a word. She grabbed her purse from under the register and walked toward the door. The diner was dead silent. No one moved. Arthur watched her go. He felt a rage building in him that he hadn't felt in 40 years. He stood up. His knees popped. He walked out of the booth. He walked past the spilled pastry. He walked right up to Brad. Brad laughed. You want some too, old man? Brad asked. You want me to throw you out personally? Arthur stood tall. He wasn't hunched over anymore. He wasn't shaking. He looked at Brad with eyes that were cold and hard as steel. Pick it up. Arthur said. Brad blinked. Excuse me, pick it up. Arthur repeated the pastry. Pick it up. Brad stepped closer. He towered over Arthur. Get out of my face. Bum before I. Before you what? Arthur interrupted. His voice was low, dangerous. Before you assault a customer. Before you violate labor laws by firing an employee without cause. Before you explain to corporate why your food costs are down but your customer satisfaction scores are the lowest in the state. Brad froze. He looked at Arthur, really looked at him. He saw the eyes. Those weren't the eyes of a homeless man. Those were the eyes of a man who was used to being obeyed. Who are you? Brad whispered. Arthur didn't answer. He reached into his dirty coat pocket. He pulled out a phone. He pressed a single button. He held it to his ear. Brad watched, confused. Someone answered on the other end. Hello, Arthur said into the phone. Yes, this is Arthur Sterling. Brad's face went white. He stumbled back. He grabbed the counter for support. No, it's not a prank. Arthur said, his eyes locked on Brad. I'm at the downtown location. Store number 402. Yes, I'm here right now. Arthur listened for a moment. I want you to come down here immediately and bring the termination paperwork. Brad started shaking his head. No, he whispered. No, no, no. Arthur continued. Yes, for the general manager, effective immediately, and bring a new contract. For the general manager position, Arthur paused. Name. He looked at the door where Sarah had just left. Her name is Sarah. I don't have her last name, but she just left. Find her. Arthur hung up the phone. He slipped it back into his pocket. He looked at Brad. Brad was hyperventilating. Mr. Sterling. Brad stammered. I didn't know. It was a mistake. I was just trying to protect the brand. Arthur stepped closer. Protect the brand? Arthur asked. He pointed at the spilled food. He pointed at the terrified customers. He pointed at the empty space where Sarah used to be. You didn't protect the brand, Brad. You destroyed it. You forgot the only rule that matters. Arthur leaned in. People aren't numbers on a spreadsheet. Brad was crying now. Actual tears. Please, sir, I have a mortgage. I have a car payment. Arthur nodded. I know. Arthur said, Sarah has a sick child and rent due on Tuesday, but you didn't care about that, did you? Brad looked down. Arthur sighed. He felt the adrenaline fading. He felt the exhaustion returning. Get out. Arthur said, but my shift. Brad started, is over. Arthur finished. Forever. Leave your keys on the counter. Brad didn't argue. He trembled as he fished a ring of keys from his pocket. He dropped them on the stainless steel. He walked out the back door. He didn't strut this time. He slunk away like a beaten dog. The diner was quiet again. Arthur looked at the customers. They were staring at him with wide eyes. Arthur cleared his throat. Folks, he said. His voice was loud and clear. I apologize for the disturbance. He pointed to the kitchen. The meal is on the house tonight for everyone. A few people clapped. Someone cheered. Arthur didn't smile. He picked up a napkin. He bent down. And he picked up the pastry from the floor. He cleaned the spot himself. Then he walked to the window. He looked out at the rain. He hoped the district manager would find Sarah fast. He hoped it wasn't too late. 10 minutes later, the door opened. A man in a suit ran in. He was soaking wet. He was holding a briefcase. He spotted Arthur instantly. Mr. Sterling. The man gasped. He ran over. Arthur didn't turn around. Did you find her? Arthur asked. The man nodded, breathless. She was at the bus stop down the block. She's coming. She's confused, sir. She thinks she's in trouble. The bell chimed again. Sarah walked in. She was soaking wet. Her hair was plastered to her face. She was hugging her purse to her chest. She saw the man in the suit. Then she saw Arthur. She stopped. She looked at Arthur's dirty coat. Then she looked at the way the man in the suit was standing, respectful, head bowed. She looked at the keys on the counter. "Sarah," Arthur said. Sarah took a step forward. "Who are you?" she whispered. Arthur walked over to her. He took off the dirty coat. Underneath, he was wearing a simple black t-shirt. He smiled. "I'm the guy who wanted a cherry pie," he said. Sarah looked at the man in the suit. "This is Arthur Sterling," the man said. "He owns the company." Sarah's eyes went wide. She covered her mouth. "Oh my God, I gave you a towel. I called you sweetie." Arthur laughed, a real laugh this time. "You treated me like a human being." "Sarah, that's worth more than you know." He gestured to the empty diner. "This place needs a leader." Arthur said, "Someone who knows that people come first. Someone who isn't afraid to stand up for what's right, even when it costs them everything." Sarah looked around. "Me?" Arthur nodded. "The salary is $80,000 a year." Arthur said, "Plus benefits, plus a bonus structure that rewards kindness, not just cost-cutting." Sarah started to cry again. $80,000, that covers the medical bills, right?" Arthur asked. Sarah nodded vigorously. She couldn't speak. "Good," Arthur said. He picked up the keys from the counter. He held them out to her. "Welcome to the team, manager." Sarah took the keys. Her hands were still cold from the rain, but she held them tight. "Thank you," she whispered. Arthur smiled. "One more thing," he said. "Yes, Mr. Sterling, bring back the cherry pie." Sarah laughed through her tears. "Yes, sir, fresh cherries, starting tomorrow." Arthur nodded. He walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" Sarah asked. Arthur paused. "I have a lot of work to do," he said. "I have 400 other locations to visit." He looked at the sign in the window. The S was still flickering. "And get that sign fixed." He added. He pushed the door open. The rain was still falling, but it didn't feel as cold anymore. Arthur stepped out into the night. He walked to the black town car parked around the corner where his driver had been waiting for 3 hours. He got in. "Home, sir?" the driver asked. Arthur looked back at the diner. He saw Sarah behind the counter, tying her apron back on. She was smiling at a customer. He saw the lights glowing warm against the darkness. Arthur leaned back in the seat. He closed his eyes. "No," Arthur said, "take me to the next town. We have another diner to save, and maybe, just maybe, it was time to buy a new coat."